It's finally over. Geez, that took forever. Now that your dad's gone, Carter, I don't have to take care of you anymore, right? Right after my son Mark's funeral, my daughter-in-law Ellie said something unbelievable. What on earth was she thinking, saying something like that? How could she say that to the twins, Chris and Carter, who are grieving the loss of their father? You're the only parent these kids have left. Do you understand what you're saying? Huh? I'm gonna remarry a hot doctor. Let the old lady take care of these brats.
See ya.
While I stood there confused, Ellie just threw out her selfish remarks and walked off. Both I and the other mourners were left dumbfounded by what had just happened. Fine. After Ellie left, I muttered quietly. I'll take responsibility for Chris and Carter. After the chaotic funeral, I got home, crawled into bed, and let out a big sigh. I've never felt a day drag on this long, and I was utterly exhausted. My eyes closed naturally. At 2 a.m., creepy laughter from the room next door woke me up. I opened the door, and in the darkness, there were two faces eerily lit by the blue glow of a screen. There, I saw Chris and Carter, who I thought would be mourning, laughing while looking at the computer. I'm Mary. Ever since I lost my beloved husband 3 years ago, I've been living alone in this house. My only joy these days is when my adorable grandkids come to visit. Today, Chris and Carter are coming to visit for the first time in a while, so I've been feeling restless since morning. Even though I've already finished preparing lunch, I can't help but feel like something's missing, so I keep wandering around the house. Oh, that's right. The camera. The other day, the kids told me they'd show me their new school uniforms since they just started elementary school. To capture them looking all sharp, I started rummaging around for my camera. There it is. Now I'm all set. Just as I finally sat down with a sigh of relief, I heard the sound of a car stopping in front of the house. Grandma, hello. Hello. I heard their cheerful voices coming from the entrance. Hi there, welcome. As I responded and jogged over to the entrance, there stood Chris and Carter, wearing their shiny new backpacks and crisp school uniforms. Behind them came my son Mark and his wife Ellie. Mom, we're back. Hi, Mary. It's been a while. So glad you came, welcome. I welcomed my son's family in, and we had a little photo session of the kids in their new look. The kids, with their backpacks almost bigger than they are, looked absolutely adorable. It was hard to tell if they were carrying the backpacks or if the backpacks were carrying them. Grandma, guess what? I'm in a different class from Carter. I got a male teacher and Chris got a female teacher. That's right, the kids are twins. My only son, Mark, married Ellie 8 years ago, and not long after, they had twins. What a surprise. I remember being so thrilled, thinking I suddenly got 2 grandkids at once. But to be honest, I was quite surprised when I first heard from my son that he was marrying Ellie. Mark had always been quiet and serious, even during his school days, so I never expected him to choose someone as striking and confident as Ellie, who looks like a model. Thanks to that, the twins turned out with such striking and well-defined features. They might be considered classically good-looking. Ellie wanted to make the most of their good looks, so she was eager to get Chris and Carter into show business, sending them to dance school and taking them to auditions. When they first started kindergarten, Chris and Carter didn't really understand what was happening, so they just went along with the dance lessons and auditions. As I wondered how they've been doing lately, I was helping Mark prepare dinner in the kitchen. When Ellie went out to the car to grab something she forgot, Mark quietly started talking. Mom, actually. It seemed to be about Chris and Carter. Right after they started elementary school, they rebelled, saying they didn't want to dance or be on TV anymore. For a while, things weren't good between them and Ellie. After starting elementary school, Chris and Carter began to assert themselves and told Mark and Ellie how they felt. It seems they took after Mark, both being uncomfortable with being in the spotlight. Ellie really wanted them to keep going, but we decided to stop everything for the sake of Chris and Carter. It almost caused tension between us, but things are fine now. I had been curious about how things were going but hadn't asked. So, Mark quietly confided in me, making sure Ellie and the kids couldn't hear. It seems they're focused on getting used to school life now. We all sat around the dinner table, listening to Chris and Carter talk excitedly about school. I had been worried about their reserved personalities, but I felt relieved to see them enjoying school. After a nice meal and plenty of conversation, seeing Chris and Carter leave with big smiles on their faces made me feel so happy. A few months later, Mark and his family of 4 came to visit again. So, what have Chris and Carter been up to lately? What new things can they do? I made a drawing on the computer move the other day. I'm learning a new programming language right now. Sorry, I have no idea what you're talking about, but it sounds like you're learning some amazing things. Lately, both of them have been more into computers than sports. I don't know much about computers at all. But from what Mark tells me, Chris and Carter are far more advanced with computers than other kids their age. Both Mark and I believe they have a real talent for computers, and we're hopeful for their future. Mark's even been looking into programming classes nearby for them. Doing boring, nerdy stuff on computers? They'd make way more money and become famous if they were on TV. Ellie didn't seem too pleased with their growing interest in computers. Seems like Ellie still hadn't completely given up on getting them into show business. Come on, let them do what they enjoy. Mark said this, trying to calm Ellie down. I nodded in agreement, thinking to myself that the greatest happiness is letting the grandkids grow up doing what they love. Time passed, and Chris and Carter are now in the 6th grade. They're still just as passionate about computers, and a few years ago, they completed all their programming classes and graduated from the course. Lately, Mark's been traveling a lot for work and is often away from home. Because of Ellie's work schedule, Chris and Carter often end up spending time at my place. Dad's never home, so we can't go anywhere. It's boring. We promised to go camping next time he's off work, but will he actually take us? Your dad's really busy with work. I'm sure he wants to spend time with you both, but he's working hard. Let's wish your father good luck. Chris and Carter seem a bit upset that they don't get to spend much time with Mark because of his busy schedule. Mark had excitedly told me before that he was put in charge of a major project that could make or break the company. Now that the project has finally kicked off, he's working hard with his team. Lately, though, I've been watching Chris and Carter not just during the day but even overnight. At first, I gladly helped out, thinking Ellie could use a little break since she's practically handling both work and parenting on her own. But now, every time Mark goes on a business trip, Ellie seems to stay out overnight. While I love spending time with my grandkids more than anything, it's starting to feel a bit too frequent. They're in 6th grade, so it's not like they need much looking after. I wonder if it's really that hard for her. Hey, Mary, I'm sorry to bother you again, but could you help out today too? Ellie left confidently. Chris and Carter are staying over tonight as well.
Oh no.
I forgot my medicine. Carter, you're feeling under the weather? That's not good. Ellie just left, so I'll give her a call to bring it back. I called Ellie. I rang several times, but she didn't pick up. Eventually, I got a message saying, the phone you are calling is either turned off or out of service. Ellie didn't answer the phone. Your mom didn't answer. What should we do about your medicine? I hope your cold doesn't get worse. Oh.
Yeah.
My mom turns off her phone whenever she's doing something important. I couldn't help but ask Chris again. Wait, so when she's busy with something important, you can't reach her at all?
Yeah.
I can never get through to her. But I'm not that sick, Grandma, I'll be fine. While I was worried, both of them seemed completely calm. Even if she has something important going on, what would she do if there were an emergency with the kids? Nothing major has happened so far, and the kids are safe, but this seems dangerously close to neglect. I felt bad for Chris and Carter, who didn't seem to be getting much attention from their mother, and it left me feeling unsettled. The next evening, when Ellie came to pick them up, I asked her about it. Ellie, Carter forgot his medicine, so I tried calling you a bit after you left. Was it hard for you to pick up the phone? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I had my phone off. Didn't the kids tell you? Ellie answered without a hint of guilt, as if it were perfectly normal. Oh, I see. But you know, something could happen, so it might be a good idea to keep your phone on. Her attitude caught me off guard, and I couldn't say anything more. Chris and Carter stayed over several more times after that. While I was watching them, I had to call Ellie a few times, but as expected, she never picked up. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number on my cell phone. I didn't recognize the number. I answered cautiously, and I heard a man's panicked voice. Hello, is this Mark's mother? I'm a coworker of his. I'm sorry to call out of the blue, but please stay calm. Mark is in the hospital right now. It took me a moment to fully grasp what he was saying. A wave of anxiety suddenly hit me. I jotted down the hospital's name from his coworker and quickly called a taxi. On the way there, I had no idea how Mark was doing, and the worry made it impossible to stay calm. Mark is in the hospital, what could have happened? Is he going to be okay? Wait, does Ellie know anything? I decided to call Ellie. I desperately wanted her to answer, but all I heard was the long ringtone. Then I got the familiar message, the phone you are calling is. Even now, I can't get in touch with her. What could Ellie possibly be doing? I prayed that she would pick up, and called her over and over, but it was always the same. I kept trying to reach her on the way to the hospital, but she never answered. When I arrived at the hospital, one of Mark's coworkers, teary-eyed, met me and explained the situation. Mark had suddenly collapsed at work and was rushed to the hospital. They gave him the necessary treatment, but his condition is still critical, and he hasn't regained consciousness. We tried calling his wife, but no matter how many times we called, she didn't answer. So we reached out to you. Thank you for coming so quickly. So Ellie didn't pick up after all. Apparently, Mark had been suffering from insomnia lately, and his coworkers had noticed he looked unwell before this happened. Was Mark really so busy with work that he couldn't sleep? Had he pushed himself too far? I couldn't help but feel regret over his serious nature. I knew I had to let Ellie know what was happening, so I decided to head to Mark's house. I was so worried about Mark that it was hard to leave the hospital, but I had to go. When I arrived at Mark's house, Chris and Carter had just gotten home from school and were waiting alone. Grandma, what are you doing here? Oh, you're home already. Has your mom not come back yet? Not yet. Do you want to wait here? What should I tell Chris and Carter about Mark? I wasn't sure if it was my place to tell them. I decided I'd wait for Ellie to come back and explain everything to all three of them together. After a while, Ellie came home. Ellie, did you check your phone? I've been calling you a lot. Ellie rummaged through her bag and pulled out her phone. Mary, what's going on? Oh, you did call. Did something happen? Frustrated by her attitude, I took a deep breath and began to explain. Ellie, Chris, Carter, I need you to stay calm and listen. Mark collapsed at work today, and he's in the hospital now. The doctors have done what they can, but it seems like he still hasn't regained consciousness. Chris and Carter were clearly shocked by the news, frozen with surprise. Ellie, on the other hand, just said, "What?" without changing her expression, still focused on her phone. I had expected her to be more shocked and worried, but her reaction was so different from what I imagined that I couldn't help but stare. My confusion didn't seem to reach Ellie, who remained engrossed in her phone. And so, the days passed by. My hopes for Mark to wake up went unanswered, and he remained unconscious. The doctor eventually told us there was no hope of him regaining consciousness, and I had to start preparing myself for the worst. A few days later, Mark's funeral was held. Chris and Carter kept their heads down, saying nothing, their tears flowing non-stop. They may be strong, but they're still just sixth graders. They've lost their beloved father and must be overwhelmed with grief. All I could do was sit beside them and gently rub their backs. Ellie didn't seem to care about the kids at all, sitting there looking bored, giving half-hearted nods to the mourners. Many of Mark's coworkers, subordinates, and even his superiors attended the funeral. Everyone was mourning Mark, most with looks of regret or tears streaming down their faces. Seeing how important my son was to his company, I felt overwhelmed with emotion. But something feels off. After the wake yesterday, I overheard some of Mark's coworkers talking as they were leaving, and something about their conversation stuck with me. The project was finally getting on track and calming down, so why would he pass away so suddenly? He hadn't been working overtime lately, but he looked so worn out. He even said he couldn't sleep. What was weighing on his mind? Their conversation about Mark left a lasting impression, and it keeps running through my mind. I had assumed that Mark's condition was due to being overworked. But none of his coworkers mentioned anything about that. On the contrary, it seemed like work had settled down, and they were more concerned about how he'd been acting lately. If he was so troubled that he was unable to sleep, could there have been something else bothering him besides work? With these questions in my mind, the funeral came to an end. It's finally over. That took forever. Now that your dad's gone, I don't have to take care of you two anymore, right? Ellie sneered as she said this, right after the funeral. Those are not words a mother should say to her children with that expression. What on earth was she thinking? I couldn't understand how she could say such things to Chris and Carter, who were grieving the loss of their father. I thought there must be some mistake and asked her again. Ellie, what are you saying all of a sudden? These kids are nothing but a burden to me. I don't need them. How can you say that? You're the only parent these kids have left. Do you really understand what you're saying? I tried hard to calm her down, thinking she must be having a moment of confusion. There's nothing to think about. This is perfect, I can finally live with my boyfriend. Boyfriend? What do you mean? I'm going to marry a hot doctor. Let the old lady take care of these brats.
See ya.
While I was still trying to process what had happened, Ellie threw out those selfish words and walked away without a second thought. Both I and the other mourners were left stunned by the sudden turn of events. Fine. After Ellie left, I muttered quietly. I'll take responsibility for Chris and Carter. Growing up abandoned by their mother would only cause them more pain. They'll have a much better environment living with me. More than anything, I feel blessed to be able to live with these adorable grandkids. Just as I made that resolution in my heart, Chris spoke up. Grandma, can we live with you? Of course, you absolutely can. Chris smiled, looking relieved. It's better to be with you than with Mom. She's never home anyway, and I don't think she cares about us. Carter's words were painful to hear. How could Ellie be so indifferent toward them, to make her own kids feel this way? We stopped by Mark's house to quickly pack some things for Chris and Carter, and then we finally made it back home. After dinner, both Chris and Carter seemed exhausted, hardly speaking and looking sleepy. They must be both physically and emotionally drained today. Not only did they have to say
Goodbye
to their father, but their mother abandoned them as well. I worried about how Chris and Carter were handling all of this emotionally. They both seemed calm, as if they were taking it all in stride, but I couldn't stop worrying about what they were truly feeling inside. Rather than saying too much, I figured it was best to quietly watch over them for a while. You two must be tired from everything today. I've set up your beds, so get some rest. Once I finish tidying up, I'll try to get some rest myself. While I was doing chores, Chris and Carter had already left the living room. It seemed they had taken their baths and gone back to their room. I finally got into bed and let out a sigh. Suddenly, the events of the day played back in my mind like a whirlwind. Is Ellie really serious about giving up on the kids? Even though it was late, I wanted to confirm her feelings, so I called Ellie once more. But all I could hear was, "The phone you are calling." I had hoped she might pick up, but instead, the familiar automated message played. I'd never felt a day drag on as long as this one had, and I was utterly exhausted. My eyes closed naturally. At 2 a.m., I was awakened by the sound of laughter coming from the room next door. I thought maybe I was imagining it, but the laughter continued. Chris and Carter were in the room next door. I thought they should be asleep, but just to be sure, I quietly peeked into their room. When I opened the door, I saw two faces lit by the bluish glow of a screen in the darkness. Chris and Carter, who I thought were asleep, were sitting in front of the computer, laughing uncontrollably. "What are you doing up at this hour?" "Oh, did we wake you up, Grandma?" "Sorry." "Hey, Grandma, take a look at this." I did as they said and peeked at the computer screen. "Ellie? Darling? Whose text messages are these? Could it be?" "Yep. That's Mom's texts with her boyfriend." On the computer screen was a chat history between Ellie and what seemed to be her boyfriend. "Grandma, you should be getting a notification on your phone right about now too." So I went to get my phone and checked it. Sure enough, there was a notification. When I opened it, it was the same chat history that was on the computer. "How did you do this? Did you too send this?" Chris and Carter answered with clear, satisfied expressions. "Yep, we did it. By now, everyone in Mom's contact list should have received the images too." "What? What do you mean?" Completely confused, I asked them to explain what was going on. "I think Dad collapsed because of Mom." It seems Mark had grown suspicious of Ellie's frequent outings lately. Chris had overheard Mark confronting Ellie about where she was going and what she was doing, but she brushed him off completely. "Maybe it's because we're just kids, but I know Dad was worried about something, and he didn't tell us anything." Mark had been struggling with Ellie going out so much and leaving the kids at my house every time. Sometimes, when I was sleeping next to Dad, I could hear him making these painful sounds, and I'd wake up. I don't think he could sleep well at all. Whether it was intuition or just being observant, they noticed their father was stressed and couldn't sleep. But at the funeral, the uncles kept saying it was because Dad was busy with work. It was totally Mom's fault. Chris said this with frustration. "No one's going to believe what kids say, so I couldn't tell anyone at the funeral that it was Mom's fault. That's why after the funeral, we decided to show everyone proof by using Mom's phone to set this all up." They knew that no matter how much they tried to explain why their dad collapsed, adults wouldn't believe them. They also figured that if they tried to speak up, Ellie would just shut them down. No matter how good they are with computers, I was shocked they exposed her this way. The boys spoke with such a sense of satisfaction that I couldn't help but be impressed. Still, I couldn't help but wonder how they got access to Ellie's phone when she wasn't home much, so I asked. Mom's terrible with smartphones and computers, so we always helped her with the settings. That's how we memorized all her passwords. We ended up seeing her text messages too, so we figured out who she was always with. She always turns off her phone when she's with so-called darling, so we set it up to send out the info when the phone is off. So if the images are being sent now, it means she turned her phone off. Look, all the proof we set up is being sent. I checked the notifications on my phone. The Brats are at the old lady's place, so I'll be with Darling today and tomorrow. Darling's hot and successful, while my husband works hard all the time and barely makes any money. Mark's not enough. Maybe I should set him up in a cheating scandal and get a big divorce settlement. There were unbelievable things written all over that chat. As I scrolled through, there were even messages about Chris and Carter. I gave birth to good-looking kids, so I thought they'd make money, but they don't even want to be in showbiz. They're total quitters, unbelievable. I spent all that money on dance lessons and auditions, and it was a complete waste. Ungrateful little brats. What kind of mother says things like that? Forcing her kids to pursue her own selfish dreams and then calling them ungrateful. I truly felt sorry for these children. I had always thought Ellie was straightforward and confident, but I never imagined she could be so vulgar and mean-spirited. I assumed she was just emotional during the funeral, but this must be her true self. Did Mark know she was like this, or was he fooled? Learning about Ellie's true nature was deeply shocking. In contrast to my shock, Chris and Carter looked completely satisfied. By now, I bet all of Mom's friends and relatives are freaking out. A few days later, I got a call from Ellie's mother. I am so terribly sorry for what my daughter has done. I don't know how to apologize enough, she said, repeatedly apologizing in an embarrassed tone. What's done is done, so I accepted her apology and asked how Ellie was doing. According to Ellie's mother, after the revelations from that day, Ellie was cut off by her family and friends. As a result, no one knows where she is or what she's doing now. I wasn't surprised, it made sense that things would end up like this. To be honest, there were days when I felt anxious about suddenly taking in Chris and Carter and wondered if this was really the right decision. But I was relieved that we cut ties with her before she could ruin these kids' lives. I truly believe they'll be much happier without Ellie in their lives. From what I've heard, the man she planned to remarry eventually saw her true nature and dumped her. But that wasn't all. Since the evidence of her affair had spread among her friends, one of them tracked down the guy she was seeing. It turned out that he was a notorious womanizer and had multiple girlfriends. Ellie was just one of many. And to top it off, he wasn't a doctor at all, he was just an employee at a small company. Many of his other lies came to light, and it sounds like he's in serious trouble now. A few days later, I received a call from Mark's company. They told me that Mark's death had been classified as a workplace accident and compensation would be provided. I know that Mark's death wasn't the company's fault. That's why I felt so guilty about it being labeled as a work accident and receiving compensation. I couldn't just quietly accept the compensation, so I went to see Mark's supervisor. I'm sorry for the trouble caused by my son's situation. The truth is, he didn't collapse because of work, it was due to the stress from his wife. I explained everything that had happened. The supervisor looked shocked after hearing my story. But then he quickly regained his serious expression. No, regardless of the reason, I want you to accept the compensation. We see this as the last recognition we can give to Mark. That's what the supervisor said. It seems Mark had pushed the project to the brink of success, and thanks to him, it became a huge achievement. Mark's contributions were significant, and they said the project wouldn't have succeeded without him. This project allowed the company to grow substantially, and they were deeply grateful to Mark, but they regretted not being able to fully express that to him. I was touched to see how highly they valued Mark. Mark's life, spent working so diligently, was not in vain. If only I could tell Mark directly that the project was a success and that the company grew because of him. But that's something that will never happen. Hoping that Mark in heaven would feel some sense of fulfillment, I decided to accept the compensation. The compensation was more than enough to cover Chris and Carter's future educational expenses. Just as Mark had said when he was alive, I want the two of them to grow up freely, doing what they love. One day, both of them will have dreams of their own. I don't want them to give up on their dreams just because they're living with me instead of their parents. When that time comes, I want to be able to offer them as many options as possible, so I decided to save the money carefully. I resolved to raise these two with the hope that they would grow up to be people who contribute to society, just like Mark did. From now on, the three of us will live happily, always keeping Mark in our hearts.